Hey guys, and welcome to another video, and welcome to my favourite video to film every year, because it's negative, and I just really love complaining. So while in the intro I said that I really liked complaining, and that is definitely true, overall 2016 wasn't a terrible reading year for me. I never really read any outright bad books. I think I chose my selections well. There were some that disappointed me, definitely for sure. But overall on this list, I don't think I give any of these books lower than 2 stars, which is actually pretty decent. There's only one book on this list that I did not finish, but that book was 500 pages, and I actually made it up to about page 400, so I feel like I can include that one, because I definitely put in the time. These books are in no particular order, and we may as well start with the one I didn't finish, and that book was The Quick by Lauren Owen. Now this is a beast of a book, I will be quite frank. It's a very long book. It's historical fiction, but it has a sort of supernatural twist. I really enjoyed the first 100 pages of this. It's all about getting to know these two characters and their relationship, but around, I want to say page 150, 200, it sort of jumps a bit into the future, and it sort of becomes about this secret society of vampires. It wasn't that it was bad, it was just that it was boring. And a story about a secret society of vampires really should not be boring. And I think back to when I read this book, I really probably could have pushed on and finished it, but it just seemed like such a drag to pick it up. It was one of those books that I tend to read before I go to bed, and I generally knew that if I picked up that book to read while I was in bed, I would fall asleep almost instantly because I just wasn't connected enough to the story. I just wasn't interested enough. In truth, I would probably read another book by this author, but this one just wasn't for me. The next book I'm going to talk about is The Girls by Emma Cline. Now again, this is really not a very bad book, and there are actually some good points about it. If you didn't know about this story, and I was to give my most spoiler-free description of it, it's basically about a girl who sort of becomes enamored with these girls from a cult, and she joins the cult only to find that it's led by a Charles Manson type figurehead. It actually rests heavily on its association with Charles Manson and what went on in his cult. Those are the most interesting parts of the book. I found everything related to the cult of this book and its sort of association with the Manson family quite interesting. It sort of takes on a sort of weird educational true crime aspect where I wanted to know what the author had included that was actually true and what wasn't true and what was more fictionalized. I found the writing style to be quite passive in a way. It was very well done, and I think it actually worked for the book. It's just that the author didn't seem to really focus on the interesting aspects of her story. The interesting aspect here is the association with the Manson family, and instead our author sort of goes into the psyche of our main character and shows what it was like to be a part of that cult, but not get any recognition or even blame for it in a way. I just found it to be quite a passive reading experience, and not one that I got fully involved in a way. The third book I'm going to mention is going to be What Belongs to You by Garth Greenwell. This is gay adult lit. My problems with this book can be summed up by one thing, and it's also an issue that I have with gay lit as a genre by itself, and that is simply the idea or aspect of a gay main character falling in love with a hustler or someone he shouldn't, basically. It's sort of rampant. I shouldn't use that word in this context, but it's just everywhere in this genre, and the story just brought nothing new to me or the gay lit genre as a whole. It didn't even bring anything new to the falling in love with a hustler genre. Nice writing, but much disappointment. The next book is a book I actually talked about recently, and that is The Raven Boys by Maggie Stiefvater. I read this book because I want to do a video based around gay characters in YA, specifically science fiction and fantasy, and I'd heard one of the characters in this book turns out to be gay in later novels, and I'd also heard that it was really good, so I was like, hey, 2 birds, 1 stone. But when I read this book, I was just sort of really disappointed. I know it came out a few years ago, and I know YA has changed a lot in that time, and there has obviously been copycats and books with similar stories, and for me this was sort of maybe a victim of that. It just felt like I had read this story many times before, but it just as a whole felt very stereotypical of the YA genre for me personally, and I thought a lot of the characters fit almost archetypes too rigidly in a way that they didn't really become characters, they were just sort of stereotypes. I have spoke about this one in a previous video, so I won't really talk about it too much now. I know I've said this word a lot in this video, but disappointed. And then the last book I'm going to talk about is the one with probably the most interesting concept on this list, and that is The Bees by Laline Paull. I really wanted to like this book when I took it out of the library. It's just such a clever concept on the dystopian. If you didn't know about this book is basically a dystopian that takes place in a beehive, and our main character is actually a bee. And when I heard that concept, I just thought, this is great. But my problem with this book and the main character can be basically summed up in Mary Sueism. To me, it felt like the author had sort of done a lot of research of having her story take place in a beehive, and she'd researched bees very, very well. So when writing this book, it felt like she wanted to include as much information as she'd found, and it basically resulted in our main character, who starts off as a little worker bee, sort of making her way around the job structure and job hierarchy of the hive, and it almost gets to the point where, you know, oh, she's not a worker now, she's a forager, and then she's not a forager, she's laying eggs just like the queen. Is it wrong to say too far-fetched in a book about bees, where bees speak? It was very educational though, and I did find out a lot more than I did know about bees. I mean, if you want to learn about bees, I really cannot dispute this novel. It definitely goes into detail. But I guess there you have it. Those were my top 5 worst books of 2016. Obviously, I am going to offset this right now by filming my top 5 books of 2016, where I will have more complimentary things to say. But overall for this video, I guess that's pretty much all I have to say, so I hope you enjoyed it, and I shall see you soon with another one. Goodbye!